So from the 1st of May to the 31st of May is Bpd Awareness Month, which is known as Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Month. It is also known as Emotionally Unstable Personality Disorder, EUPD, and I thought I'd just tell you a bit about when I got diagnosed and how it affects me, and how I wish I'd known when I was younger. It would have made some things more easier to deal with. So basically, I found out by accident on the 18th of March 2013 after one of my regular psychiatrists said, "How's it going after 2 years of psychodynamic therapy from 2010 to 2012? And whether I wanted any more help." I said yes. So she said she'd send me to mentalized based therapy 12-week course, and she gave me some paperwork, and all the paperwork kept using medical references to Bpd, and then I googled Bpd. A lot of the stuff fit me like a glove, basically. Later on, I found out that in 2004, on one of the third pages of an old psychiatry report, it had used emotionally unstable personality disorder traits as a description, and the reason my GP and others probably missed that, including me, is because it was put on the third page because I'd been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So basically, you can have many things with Bpd, and what it does is it amplifies things like depression or anxiety, in my case. Yet someone else could have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, agoraphobia, and Bpd would heighten it more. Bpd often there's an inner voice that's positive and negative, often more negative than positive, and it makes you feel like that you need to question everything, or you're useless, or don't go and do this, or you can't make friends, or you can't be someone's friend, or you've let someone down, or you've let yourself down. So even when you've been praised, you still don't believe those around you, because your voice is saying no, they just done that to shut you up, get you on with things, get them out of their face. So when I had my accident, I suffered very severe depression and anxiety, and still do. It wasn't until later on, as I said, that the Bpd was made aware to me, and then later on that stays on your file instead of the depression and anxiety. And some doctors and nurses and psychiatrists have the misconception to believe that you can't have depression or anxiety. And so when I told this to the psychiatrist I saw regularly, she confirmed that that's not correct. Bpd is environmental, background, and other reasons to have it. Depression is chemical based and anxiety is chemical based, and Bpd amplifies the depression and anxiety more than normal. So when you get in a depressive streak, it's harder to get out of that depressive episode, because the Bpd is already negative in itself. We're not talking about negative for maybe once a week. We're talking negative nearly every second or every hour, but it can also go the other way. So you can get really, really, really hyper or unstable, and so it can look like you've snapped pretty quickly, like having a temper tantrum, or a build up of emotions have built up so much that it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and it's not the emotion that you're reacting to that you're angry or upset about. It's something that's happened ages ago, and then the emotion eventually bursts. It makes life very difficult, and I wish I'd known it as a child, because obviously I wouldn't have hanged around and been like the third wheel in friendships, and I would have probably hanged around with other friends, or possible friends I should say, that wanted to hang around with me, rather than them others hanging around with me as a last resort, because there was no one else to hang around with that day, rather than actually being friends with. The voice. So imagine if depression in somebody else is at 10% or 20%, then a BPD sufferer's depression is probably at 40 or 80 or 60%. Same with any emotion, anger, sadness. BPD sufferers also have a higher suicidal tendency rate, and they have higher tendency to commit suicide or self-harm, self-harm in relationships, physical scarring, drinking too much, for example, eating too much sugary treats or chocolates. So whatever anybody else's, all emotions are only personal to the person. Yet if you imagine your worst emotion or breakdown or fight, and then amplified it by another 10 or 15 or 20%, well, that's what a BPD feels every second of every hour of every day. And another thing with, for example, you take the coronavirus lockdown, when everyone else was panic buying toilet paper and booze and alcohol because they thought the world was going to fall apart and stuff like that. Well, the reason a BPD sufferer won't go out and do that is because we live in a higher state of anxiety and panic already. So when something extra happens that affects everyone else, we have already dealt with those emotions already, those fears, those anxieties, those possible traumas. So we won't respond to the same way as someone that on an average day doesn't get anxious, doesn't get panicked, and then when something like this happens, they get panicked. And that's just one example of we're already at such a heightened flight or fight emotion that this is quite normal to us. And so one thing I am hoping is when the coronavirus settles down, which probably won't be till 2021, 2022, well, it's never going to go away. A vaccination will be created. It'll stick around like the flu and exist constantly. It'll just less people will die from it, because there'll be some form of natural herd immunity from the vaccination. Is that people realise how horrible it's been in lockdown in their homes, and when they vote for the next government, that they don't vote a government that would push you under the bus, aka the Tory government or UKIP MP, not that they exist, or Brexit MP, not that they exist, but they're the same as the Tory party or the DUP in Northern Ireland. They lack human empathy for the 99%, because they only value the 1%. So my hope is, after everything settles down a bit, that all those that have had mental health increase, or their first ever mental health episode, in the lockdown, remember that there were millions and millions of people with mental health problems before the coronavirus who were struggling, committing suicide, being locked up in hospital, being arrested, breaking down, so on and so forth, starving, food banks, poverty, working poverty. And I hope that all those that are now going through fearful, I can't pay the rent, I can't pay the bills, I can't pay my mortgage, I might lose my home, that they realise that these things already existed, yet because it wasn't important to you or us as a society, we ignored it because we wanted something like, oh, let's pay less taxes. And the problem with paying less taxes is it means that when there is a problem, there's less money to fund emergencies and the NHS and stuff like that. And so a combination, I hope that the coronavirus and the lockdown will change people's opinions politically and realise that mental health is a very serious condition, and just like physical disabilities and conditions, there's hundreds of different mental health illnesses and conditions, and they all have different effects. While you were on lockdown in your home for 7, 8, 9 weeks, and we're probably going to have another lockdown in the UK, and that's what your average mental health person goes through, sometimes beginning of their life, sometimes for 20 years, sometimes for 50 years, and sometimes for life. Because depression, anxiety can fluctuate, you can get better, and then there's things like Bpd, which often don't get better. Bipolar is a life condition, schizophrenia is a life condition. So those that have anxiety and depression, it is anything from short term to life. It depends on the situation and the trauma and what has caused the trauma, and therefore I hope that those that have it temporarily, depression, anxiety, stress, fear, when they get better, whether that be in a year's time or 2 years' time, that they don't go back to type and attack the vulnerable, the elderly, the ill, the mentally ill, the unemployed, and they go, well, actually, they need a lot of help and society should change. And I was struggling in the lockdown, blah, 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 for 8, 9 weeks. Yet that person's been struggling before that for 10 years or longer, or 18 or 15 or 50. And imagine how you would feel if your effects of the coronavirus lockdown lasted 10, 15, 20 years, and then a Tory government was in power for 30 years. I think you'd change your perception of voting such a party, for example. So often I find it very difficult to socialise and interact with people. So all like so let's pull it an example. You go round to visit family or friends, and the rest of the family can talk to each other quite easily, quickly, in detail. Well, someone with BPD like myself, we struggle to talk about certain things. We lack confidence, we're shy, we're quiet, unless it's a subject that we're really, really passionate about. that doesn't mean someone else would be passionate about it. Or say there was a situation where you go and meet family or friends and you know it's time to leave and you don't leave the family or friends. It's not because you don't know it's time to leave. You then you're like, oh, I'm meant to leave. And then you panic. And then you're like, oh no, I can't leave now. I better wait another minute. Oh no, I can't. And then before you know it, you start to panic more and you panic. And then you don't leave, and then you don't leave for an hour or whatever. BPD's like lots of emotions that are intense. You're fear-stricken. No one could be a harder critic on you, or no one can be a harder critic than a BPD's sufferer's own mind. So if you think you're tough on yourself, we're tougher on ourselves even more. Even when we know it's not true, it's not correct. It's difficult to explain. Yeah, out of a lot of mental health illnesses, BPD is quite time consuming because the emotions can fluctuate. So like take bipolar for example, you might fluctuate over a week or a month. A BPD sufferer can fluctuate within a matter of seconds. So you could say something to them and they get emotionally upset very quickly. And it's not because they snap, it's just that their emotions are like burning in their mind constantly. It's like the emotions burn and burn and burn and burn in the mind constantly. And so just touching that emotion is painful and very loud and intense, and it makes it difficult to breathe, and you begin to sweat and you begin to become fearful and you panic and you're like, oh fuck, what's going on now? Oh god, not again. And to everyone else, you look like you can be classed as a drama queen, or if you're the other way in a BPD episode, you can also look like you're callous or you're detached from emotions. Well, we do try to detach ourselves from our emotions sometimes because they're so hard to deal with that we have to ignore, or we choose to ignore, or we push them away and suppress them, because when we touch those emotions, they overwhelm us. Like, what's the point of living? You begin to sweat, have problem breathing, panic. We can go from, like I said, from happy to sad, to happy to angry, sad to angry, happy to laughable, fear, panic, anxiety. We could literally go on a spending spree and then 4 minutes later be really upset that we've gone on a spending spree and start attacking ourselves and say, well, you don't deserve this. Why did you buy this? You can't afford it. You don't deserve a treat. You're a horrible human being. Oh, you've let society down. You've let everyone down because you bought something. And then you can go to actually no, it's okay to have bought this, and the BPD fluctuates like that really quickly, and to everyone else it can either look like you're ignoring someone, you're rude, or being aggressive, or you're being shy, or you're being someone that doesn't want to socialize. Like, lots of people can let themselves go, they'll dance, they'll sing, they'll be loud. A BPD sufferer often becomes red-faced, blushed. The thought of getting up on the dance floor or going to talk to someone in a crowded room is like whatever scares the crap out of you personally. Spiders, snakes, jumping out of a plane, heights. Well, that's what we feel like when it comes to talking, socializing, interacting, speaking up on our behalf of ourselves. Like, if we were in a restaurant and something was really dreadful, we would rather just eat the food and never come back to that restaurant again, whereas most people would send the food back or complain or be really loud and say, this is ridiculous, this is rubbish. We can't wait to get out of the room, we can't wait to get out of the restaurant, we can't wait to get out of the family house if something's embarrassing, or even if it's not been embarrassing, it feels embarrassing to us and the emotions are very high. So one thing that BPD sufferers need, or they found out we need, is specialised therapies. One's called Dialectical Behavioural Therapy, DBT, and one's called Mentalised Based Therapy. And they often normally should last 18 months, yet they don't, depending on the funding, what parts of the country. They can range from 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. They can last hours or days over a week, and that is to teach ourselves to not listen to the BPD mind. Some BPD sufferers suffer black and white thinking, which I do as well, yet not in every aspect of my life or every aspect of my thoughts. Some sufferers will suffer everything's black and white, good, bad, there's no in between, evil or good, there's no in between. My black and white thinking probably, for example, is on political, for example. You shouldn't really vote Tory, you should vote Labour or Lib Dem. Historically, there isn't an in-between, oh, well, you can vote Tory in this scenario. If you check history, I'm probably likely right, as most people are, that you shouldn't vote Tory. But there I will probably be a bit more black and white than most on that. But other aspects I won't be black and white. I try to see the middle ground in a lot of things. We all have black and white thinking. Some of us also can see the middle ground. BPD sufferers are often good listeners, loyal. We can give you great advice, even though that's the advice that we can't follow. It's not wrong advice, it's just that we can't follow it because of the fluctuation of the BPD mind goes like that. We're like sponges. So when we say we can feel your emotional pain, it's true, or your emotional distress, because we pick up your emotions very, very, very quickly. And that's why there's this misconception that BPD sufferers can be classed as manipulative. It's not that we're manipulative. Anyone can be manipulative. It's because we can pick up on your emotions and other people's emotions so quickly, as well as our own emotions, that we might explain something and it might look manipulative, yet it's because we can feel that trauma. Now, we can't always relate exactly how it feels, but compared to any other mental health illness or personality disorder, we soak up other people's emotions far too quickly, as well as our own. And we do the opposite also. If we're sad, we can hang around happy people and we could make them sad. It's not done deliberately. It's how we feel at the time. So it's hard to explain, yet you can hang around someone, you could make them sad, you're not trying to make them sad, yet suddenly you are. Also, I have a problem. It's not that I don't want to talk to family, it's that I don't know how to talk to family. I don't have any friends, and people don't believe that, yet that is exactly the case. Because if I'd known I had BPD, as I said, I wouldn't have been the boy that hanged around with other kids that seemed cooler, or I don't know, more outgoing. I would have not been the third wheel, as it were. I would have perhaps hanged around those that came to me first. Instead, I would push those that came to me first away, because I couldn't believe that anyone would want to hang around with me in the first place. So I can't accept that those have come to me first want to hang around with me. So I would push them away, and then I would attach myself to those that I thought were cooler or more outgoing, to become more cool or outgoing, and then I would become the third wheel. So I would only be hanged around with in a bigger group, or as a last resort. Also, I found school difficult, so I went to 2 nurseries, 2 primary schools, 2 secondary schools, a children's home, a therapeutic boarding school, and left school at 15. I joined Army Cadets at 15 and a half to 17 and a half, and although I loved it, I would find interacting outside of the actual training side of it, so map reading, first aid, rifle shooting, marching, drilling, in the downtime before and after Army Cadets, I would find that very difficult to interact. And when I had to do small bits of talking, I also found that quite difficult, as in, like, you had to explain the history of your Army Cadet regiment that you were in as a teenager, for example. I found that difficult. Lots of things I found difficult because of BPD. So I personally think people should be told that they've got BPD as young as 10, perhaps. Obviously, I wasn't told until, so let me see, 2013. I'm trying to think. So I was born in 1984. So 2013 was 7 years ago. So I was 30, because I'm 36 or 37. I can't figure that out in my head. Anyway, I didn't find out until I was 30, basically. I wish I'd found out I had BPD when I was 10, because also I'm the type of person that would have brushed up on understanding BPD so that I could explain it to others in more detail, the do's and don'ts and where I've gone wrong and how I can look after myself, and why I might react in a certain way compared to what I don't like. I don't like using the word normal yet, like a normal person would have done. They wouldn't struggle as much, basically. So our emotions seem like an overreaction, and then we look at other people's emotions and reactions and think, well, they have just punched someone. For example, I was punched in the face because I said I wouldn't scribble on my work, and that doesn't seem unnormal to me, to say I won't scribble on my work, yet a punch in the face is seen, to me, I was punched in the face for that, it is abnormal, yet they often will react like that, the bully or the person. Their reactions will be constantly different, yet we have a breakdown, like maybe very rarely, yet the person who is the bully, for example, has a breakdown nearly all the time, yet we're told to change our behaviour. So a BPD sufferer will often have heard in their lifetime, it's your behaviour that needs to change, it's your reaction that needs to change. You can't feel like that, you don't feel like that. And that's how I think BPD starts in people. Something happens as a child, they react in a way that a teacher or a parent or an adult doesn't like, or another child doesn't like, and then you're told to change your behaviour, and not the person who is actually should change their behaviour. So you start to panic and learn that you're getting mixed messages from the world. So then you start telling yourself, well, maybe my behaviour does need to change. Maybe it isn't normal to not punch someone. Maybe it isn't normal not to bully someone. Even though you know that's not right, because so many people keep saying, well, you can't feel sad over this, or you can't feel happy over that, or don't laugh here, or don't speak like that, or don't have fun here, or don't be angry there, don't cry at this. So your emotions start being reinforced by other people as well, and then your brain starts going, well, maybe it's me that needs to change. And I think that's how lots of BPD exists. I've also noticed that in groups, a lot of BPD sufferers are from LGBT backgrounds. Maybe that's because they fear of being outed, bullied, attacked, can't be themselves, so we hide ourselves, and then we have to keep hiding ourselves, and then we say, oh no, we can't be gay, we can't be lesbian, we can't be bisexual, we can't be transgender. So then we learn from our sexuality as well that we can't be this, we can't be that. And then we learn to accept it later on and we come out and da 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 da. I think that's another reason more LGBT communities are from have BPD in their background, because I said BPD is designed by environment, socioeconomics, trauma, background, environment, and possible chemical reaction to the brain as well, which probably comes from some form of trauma, and that's why our emotions are more heightened. And it's totally different from depression or anxiety or any other illness. And the switch is very, very quick. And for me, as a BPD sufferer, I don't like being told how I should feel, how I should react, because I've had that most of my life, whether it was meant to be done that way. A BPD sufferer will cling on to the positive and the negative, and then suddenly we carry that around. Like I said, we're a sponge, we pick it up and we start to drown in our own emotions. We're constantly either drowning or on fire with our emotions, to the point that it is bloody difficult to stay afloat or to keep the fire out. And sometimes we know what our emotion is or our trigger is, and other times we don't know what our emotion is or trigger, and it'll take a while to find that trigger or reasoning of that emotion. So we can't always pinpoint we're angry or sad or happy or fearful or anxious, and it can take a while for us to know the emotion or the trigger. Yet most of the time we know what it is, but because we've been told you can't feel like this as a child or an adolescent or an adult, we then become even more confused than normal. So I might do one more video tomorrow, as Bpd Awareness Month is the last month to do it in. As I said, the 1st of May to the 31st of May is Bpd Awareness Month, borderline personality disorder, also known as emotionally unstable personality disorder. As I said, we're loyal. We give good advice, even though we can't always take our own advice or advice that we learn from others that we know is good for us. It's because our emotions just keep jumping too quickly for us to even take that emotion in or advice in, for example. So yeah, most of this won't be listened to by most people anyway, because it's 40 minutes and it's a bit rambly. That's another thing, actually. Me, as a BPD sufferer, I ruminate, so I often live in the past or the possible future. Living in the second is hard. So we either try and correct the future that we live in and hope like, oh, we'd like a job, we'd like to volunteer, we'd like to do something, or we try and worry about the past that we can't correct, can't change, can't override. We'll never be able to change the past. We can learn from it, but we can't change it, we can't correct it. And then we jump to the future. I want to shave, I want to bath, I want a job, I want to volunteer. I want something, I'd like to do something. But living in the here and now is the hardest, because living in the here and now requires just step by step, something we do, baby steps, we must do it now. And it requires focusing on something that we can't control. So we could possibly control the future by setting up a goal, making the goal too inachievable. So instead of like going for, I don't know, one volunteering position in a charity shop, we'll try to jump straight into work. Now that goal's unachievable for someone like me, been out of work for 15 years. Volunteering once a month or once a week is an achievable goal, yet I'd make a goal unachievable. Get a 40-hour a week job. Just do it. Go on. And then I'll blame myself when I can't do it. So we ruminate. We find it difficult to live in the moment, and that's another difficult thing. That's why we use mindfulness, mindful thinking, from dialectical behavioural therapy, mentalised based therapy, DBT as it's also known, or MBT. Anyway, I'll try and do maybe one more video tomorrow, and it might be a bit more coherent, and I'll post it on Instagram, as it will be the last day to do Bpd Awareness Month, or Bpd Awareness Month, Emotionally Unstable Personality Disorder, or Borderline Personality Disorder. As I said, I don't expect most people to pay attention or listen to this because it's 40 minutes, quite rambly, incoherent, a bit like a BPD mind. Okay.